That is not a complicated, I can tell you, if I go home to Texas and I get 100 people in a room, I promise you 99 of them will say, well, of course we ought to ask a question about that.
I think gender is actually, complex in ways that are surprising to many people. And my view on this matter is that fundamental to this topic is respect for the individuals who are involved. And I would keep coming back to that as
Okay, but you're not answering my question. Do you believe it is settled science and thus it is unacceptable to ask questions about the impact of a child of administering severe, life-altering drugs at very young ages? Do you think that is settled science and nobody is allowed to question it?
Senator, that's an area that's, again, very complex.
Of course, you can ask questions about what's the impact of giving life-altering drugs to kids. That is not a complicated, I can tell you, if I go home to Texas and I get 100 people in a room, I promise you 99 of them will say, well, of course we ought to ask a question about that. I find it amazing that you're nominated to be a cabinet-level position as the president's science advisor, and you're not even willing to acknowledge that asking questions about the long-term physical and emotional health to a child, asking those questions is okay.
Senator, I think you're talking about some issues that certainly require a lot more thought and
okay, unfortunately, what you're demonstrating here is that politics is more important than science because they're obvious science and medical questions.
What happens when the highest scientific office in the nation refuses to answer a very basic question? The entire committee room goes completely silent. A cabinet-level nominee is suddenly cornered by a single terrifying concept. The concept in question is known as settled science. This is not just another boring congressional hearing. This is a dramatic ideological collision. Senator Ted Cruz is pressing Dr. Prabhakar, the nominee for the president's science advisor. He is asking her if there is ever a time when scientific inquiry is no longer required. At first, the exchange seems entirely normal. Dr. Prabhakar gives a textbook answer. She states that the enterprise of science is one of continuous inquiry. She explains that while consensus emerges, the nature of science is to continue to ask questions from all perspectives. Senator Cruz completely agrees with this premise. He notes that history is entirely replete with instances of scientific consensus being categorically wrong. The trap is slowly being set. The tension begins to build as the conversation shifts toward a hidden political agenda. Cruz reminds the room of a critical historical fact. It was once considered settled science that the Earth was the center of the universe. Galileo was actually labeled a heretic for daring to question that official narrative. The room listens closely as the historical parallels are drawn. The history lesson does not stop there. Less than 200 years ago, it was settled science that hand washing did absolutely nothing to prevent disease. Everyone officially knew that disease was simply caused by an imbalance of bad air or evil spirits. Settled science has a very funny way of shifting over time. This brings us to the first critical moment of the confrontation. Cruz introduces a recent statement from the administration. He quotes Assistant Secretary for Health Rachel Levine. The quote states that there is absolutely no debate in the medical community about the validity of gender-affirming care. The words hang heavily in the silent room. This care can involve puberty-blocking drugs for young children. At extreme levels, it can even involve surgeries that permanently alter reproductive capacity for the rest of their lives. Cruz locks eyes with the nominee. He asks a very direct question. He wants to know if it is accurate that such questions are settled science, and no one is even allowed to ask about the consequences for an 8-year-old child. The camera captures a moment of intense hesitation. The nominee is suddenly caught between scientific inquiry and a strict political agenda. Dr. Prabhakar attempts to navigate the treacherous waters. She calls the area quite complex. She states that her fundamental view on the topic is respect for the individuals involved. But this is not the scientific answer the committee is looking for. Cruz immediately presses her again. He points out that she is actively avoiding the core question. He asks if it is unacceptable to question the impact of administering severe, life-altering drugs at very young ages. The confrontation is now reaching a boiling point. The nominee deflects once more. She claims she does not have deep personal familiarity with the issue. She states it is an area where she would want to learn a lot more. The silence in the room transforms into palpable shock. Cruz cannot hide his absolute disbelief. He points out the absurdity of the situation. He states that if he asked 100 people in Texas, 99 of them would agree that we must ask questions about this. The gap between Washington politics and everyday reality is abruptly exposed. He delivers a devastating rhetorical blow. He finds it amazing that a cabinet-level nominee for science advisor refuses to acknowledge that asking questions about a child's health is acceptable. This is the exact moment the political mask slips entirely. The nominee has chosen a political talking point over basic scientific inquiry. Cruz officially concludes the first round of questioning. He states that, unfortunately, this demonstrates that politics is more important than science. But the relentless pressure is far from over. The senator immediately pivots to another highly sensitive topic. He moves the spotlight to energy and climate. He notes that there may be no area of science that is more heavily politicized than this exact subject. He poses a purely factual, data-driven question to the science nominee. He asks which nation, out of nearly 200, has reduced its CO2 emissions by the greatest number of total tons over the past 15 years. The nominee stumbles. She states she would want to look at the data to give a complete answer. She vaguely acknowledges that the U.S. has been very good at reducing emissions, but she cannot provide the explicit fact. Cruz immediately fills the curiosity gap. The correct answer is the United States of America. He reveals that the U.S. has reduced CO2 emissions by more than 600 million metric tons in the past 15 years. This is a massive, officially documented record. But the real mystery is not the number itself. The real mystery is the hidden cause behind this massive reduction. Cruz asks what the principal cause is for this global leading achievement. He specifically notes that there is an objectively correct answer to this inquiry. Dr. Prabhakar attempts to answer using the administration's preferred narrative. She claims the shifts came from efficiency improvements. She credits changes in manufacturing and the rapid adoption of renewables. It sounds like a perfect, environmentally friendly explanation. But the data tells a completely different story. Cruz immediately shuts down her explanation. He bluntly states that her answer is scientifically false. The room braces for the final, undeniable revelation. The true principal cause of the massive reduction in CO2 emissions is not solar panels. It is not wind turbines. It is the direct substitution of natural gas for coal in the production of electricity. This is an objective, undeniable scientific fact. The senator expresses his profound dismay. He points out that the nominee provided a political answer instead of talking about actual science, data, and facts. The underlying agenda has been completely dragged into the light. The official narrative has collapsed under the weight of cold, hard data. Cruz connects the final dots for the committee. This deliberate ignorance explains the administration's relentless hostility toward natural gas. They are actively fighting the very resource that is the principal driver of carbon reductions. The policy directly contradicts the scientific reality. He leaves the room with a chilling conclusion. This behavior is not science. It is simply politics, and frankly, it is incredibly bad politics. The hearing moves on, but the damage to the official narrative is permanent. This confrontation reveals the hidden mechanics of Washington. The term settled science is frequently weaponized to prevent inconvenient questions. When officials hide behind this phrase, they are often masking a profound lack of actual data. True science never fears a difficult question. The American public deserves absolute transparency from its leaders. When a cabinet nominee cannot admit that questioning medical treatments for children is valid, we have a serious problem. When a top science official ignores the data on natural gas, the system is fundamentally broken. The truth is hidden in the records, waiting to be exposed. We must continuously examine these tense committee hearings. The real answers are rarely found in the polished press briefings. They are found in the moments when politicians are pressed, when the room goes silent, and when the official documents contradict the talking points. This is where the actual political drama unfolds. The record on emissions cannot simply be deleted or redacted. The 600 million metric tons reduction is a permanent testament to the power of natural gas. Yet the political machine continues to push a completely different story. This is why we must always look beyond the surface. This is not about one senator or one nominee. It is about a system that actively discourages the pursuit of objective truth. It is a system that prefers compliance over curiosity. But as history shows, the truth always eventually breaks through the consensus. Whether it is Galileo facing the authorities or modern scientists questioning energy policy, the pattern remains exactly the same. True progress only happens when brave individuals refuse to accept the official narrative. We must always demand to see the hidden files, the raw data, and the unredacted truth. The future of our society literally depends on our willingness to ask the forbidden questions.